Hey there, and welcome to the very first episode of Aligned AF, Real Talk for the Evolving Soul. I'm Yahweh Ken, and this space is where we're going to talk about the highs and lows and what WTFs of spiritual growth, and of course, how to navigate this wild ride we call life. Now, this isn't about being perfect or always high vibe all the time. It's about being real, being vulnerable, and maybe even laughing at ourselves along the way. Does that sound good? Cool. Let's dive in. First of all, my expectations. This is my first podcast. I have zero expectations. My expectations are I get from the beginning to the end. Everything in the middle, I have no idea. I expect the first few episodes to be bumpy and clunky, and I expect my editing skills to start in the low end and eventually improve. And I hope you can bear with me. If nothing else, everything's real. Everything that I do is in real time. I don't have producers. I don't have a studio. I'm in my meditation room. I've got, a microphone and a camera and a laptop, and that's it. And this is what you're going to get until I make the improvements that I can figure out how to make. So what's the show about? Well, basically, what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a place where people could come who were experiencing an imbalance between I almost said sexual evolution. That might be one of the episodes. A place where people are experiencing an imbalance between their spiritual evolution and their everyday humanness, because it can get messy. It can get fucking ugly sometimes. We want to be on this spiritual path, and we want to improve ourselves, and we want to find our inner self and our higher frequencies, and be aligned with God, whatever it is that you're in search of. And how it doesn't always jive with day-to-day stuff. We still have to go to work, pay bills, watch our kids, worry about the yard, fix things around the house, deal with family. There's so much that we have to do in our humanness. And sometimes it feels like things can, and I'm just going to be honest here, sometimes it feels like things get in the way of your spiritual journey. I know that I personally, many times, have said, when am I going to get a break? When can I actually have the time and the space and the quiet to work on me, And what I found was over the years is that I had to make the time. I had to find ways of doing it in small pieces. And I also had to gain some pretty good tools along the way. And I've done that. And I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. But I just want to share that with people and let you know you're not alone. That we're all experiencing this, and we don't have to go through it by ourselves. So this show is for anyone who's on a spiritual journey, trying to balance the practical with the divine, and figuring out how to stay aligned when life gets messy. And there's a spoiler. Life does get messy, but that's part of the magic. We're going to talk about spiritual growth and healing without any sugarcoating. We're going to talk about the ugly stuff when it happens. And we're going to celebrate the beautiful stuff, because there is a lot of it. It doesn't always feel that way, but there is some amazing stuff when you're on this spiritual ride. We'll talk about balancing everyday life with higher frequencies, and we're going to have just real conversations. So why listen to me? Well, I guess the best thing I can do for you is tell you a little bit about me. And the number one question that I get asked all the time is, why Yahweh? How is that your name? Was that given to you? Were you born Yahweh? What's up with that? What, do you think that you're God? I get that a lot. And that's okay, because part of the reason I have that name, I think, is to raise questions. So my legal name is Matthew. I was born Matthew Kent, and I've been Matthew for more than half a century. But a few years ago, I stopped feeling like Matthew. It's just there was something happening, part of my spiritual journey. I stopped feeling like what I had come to learn was Matthew. Matthew was a very different person than what I am today, or what I was just a few years ago. And I actually had gotten to the point where, sometimes when people called out my name, I didn't answer right away because I didn't think they were talking to me. So I spent time trying to figure all that out. I was confused. I think a lot of us go through that, where we just all of a sudden don't identify with ourselves anymore. And so I had reached a point where I just needed to know. I needed to understand who I was and what I wanted to be. And so I have a regular meditation practice, and I was meditating one day, and I finally just gave it all up to the universe, and I said, okay, I need to know. Who am I to me? What do I call myself? Now, before I continue, there's folks that are always saying, well, I don't like labels. Why do we have to label everything? And I get what you're saying, but labels are important sometimes. Labels can save our lives, whether something's hot or cold, whether something's safe or dangerous, whether something's toxic or not toxic. And it also it helps us with our communication. We have to call each other something so that we can communicate clearly. And that's really what I'm talking about when I say labels. So again, I'm meditating, and I just ask, who am I? What do I call myself? And clear as day, as if there were somebody sitting right next to me, I heard, well, feel free to use Yahweh. And I was shocked at first. I was like, Yahweh? I mean, that's the name of God. How can I get away with using that? Well, what do you believe about God? Well, I believe God is in everything. God is everywhere. I don't see God as this, old guy with a beard sitting on a throne up in heaven somewhere. I see God as everything: the rocks, the air, the sky, me, you, this microphone. God's part of everything. Right. So why can't you identify as Yahweh? And I didn't have a good answer. And the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel good. It started to feel right. So after my meditation, I really, truly felt like Yahweh was me. And I went to my wife, Alara, and I told her what had happened. And she was like, yeah, that's it. And she's been calling me Yahweh ever since. So I introduced myself as Yahweh everywhere I go. I still have my legal name, and I still use that to sign documents, checks, things like that. But when I introduce myself, I say, I am Yahweh. And I get some interesting reactions. I get raised eyebrows. People, pull back. Some, I've had people say, wow, that's really cool, man. And I've had other people kind of give me a look and not say anything. And I even had one guy shake my hand and say, I can't wait to get home and tell my wife I met Yahweh today. Of course, I reminded him that every time he looks in the mirror, he sees Yahweh, but you know, can't convince everybody of everything. So as you know, so that's the Yahweh story, and that's what I answer to. And I've got some friends out there that absolutely refuse to call me Yahweh, still call me Matthew, and said they always will. And you know what? That's fine. It's, you know, it's a little disrespectful, but it's no big deal. I'm not taking it personally. And quite honestly, I don't give a damn what they call me because I may or may not answer. Depends. So we'll leave it at that. My spiritual path really started as a child. You know, I was raised by, I had my mom. My mom was single when I was born, but my dad wasn't. That's probably an episode all by itself. So we grew up. We lived in my great-grandmother's house, and great-gram raised me until I was about 6 years old. And Graham was, so the story goes, I'm not 100% certain and not sure I really want to track it all down, but the story is that Graham was 100% Abenaki, and she lived on a reservation just outside Quebec. And when she was 15 years old, my soon-to-be great-grandfather, Gilbert, came over, met her. They fell in love, and her parents did not approve, so he took her and moved to Vermont. Now, she says that she went of her own free will, and I believe her. And then they started a family, you know, and so Graham, for me, was probably the most influential human being in my entire spiritual journey. As a child, as a young child, she was teaching me to get in touch with my inner feelings, to truly trust my gut, to trust my intuition. She would take me for walks downtown, and we would sit and we would watch people. And she would just lean over and she would say, "See that man over there? What do you think about that man?" And I'd think about it for a second and I'd say, "That seems like a very nice man. I'd like him." And she would not try to change my mind. She would just say, "Remember that feeling." And then she would do it again a little later. She'd say, "Do you see that man over there?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I don't like that man." And I didn't know why. And she wouldn't try to change my feelings. She would just say, "Remember that feeling." And I got to the point where I felt I could pretty much sum up how I was going to feel about somebody and really kind of see their true character just in meeting. And so, you know, she taught me that. She taught me fun stuff like how to know when it's going to rain by the smell in the air or by the look of the leaves on the trees. She taught me when it was good fishing just by a certain smell in the air. She taught me to enjoy the smell of skunk. To this day, my favorite smell. I know, it's weird. But to this day, skunk is one of my favorite smells because she told me it reminds her that it's spring. It reminds her all the skunks come out and they've got lots of babies going on and they're all out spraying and unfortunately running in the roads and things like that. That's why you see more skunks hit on the side of the road in the springtime than you do any other time of year. But it just reminds me of that. Another one that I absolutely love, another smell that Graham taught me about, is cow manure. I love driving along a country road near a farm and the smell of cow manure. I roll the windows down. My kids haven't always liked that idea, but I love it. To me, it's one of the sweetest smells in the world because it reminds you that things are growing, that they use that to help grow our vegetables, you know, that we eat. It's the smell is something that's earthy and just really shows you that things are growing and things are good that are happening. So she set me on this path. for lots of other reasons too, which we can get into in other episodes. And I found that I spent a lot of time as I was growing up, a lot of time as I was growing up, um, associating my spirit with religion. Now, see, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so there really wasn't a lot of spirituality talk going on unless you were part of the hippie crowd, and I wasn't, or my family wasn't. But religion was a big thing for almost all families back then. Um, as I was growing up, when I was little, I was attending church with my mom and my grandparents, and we would go to a Baptist church. And I got to be about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and I really wasn't enjoying it. I liked it when I could sit and listen to the sermon. I enjoyed that. But as a kid, you're usually shuffled off to Sunday school. And I just wasn't enjoying coloring pictures and learning songs. I wanted to be upstairs hearing about the Bible and about God. And that just wasn't allowed. The kids weren't even allowed up there except on special occasions. So I got to the point where I just said to Mom one day, I really don't want to go anymore. I don't like it. And Mom, God bless her, she said, okay. She said, you don't have to. Of course, back then, 8 years old, you could stay home by yourself for a few hours and you were safe. That's just the times. That's the way it was. So I would stay home on Sunday mornings and, watch TV or work on science stuff in my attic room, or go outside and just be in nature. And then as I got older, my friends would go to different churches, and I would say, well, maybe it was the church. Maybe I'm looking for something somewhere else. So I would go to church with my friends' families. I've been to Protestant churches and Catholic churches. I've been to synagogue. I think there's only a couple of churches that I haven't been to. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of religions, but the main ones, I haven't been to a mosque, and I haven't been to a Mormon service. But no matter what church I went to, and I could enjoy it, I could have a good time, but it just wasn't resonating with me. So I just kind of gave up. I hit high school and I was like, yeah, it's just not for me. I don't know what is going to be for me, but that wasn't it. And I spent, a lot of time partying and a lot of time, with college and work and everything, just living life and letting that take over everything. Kind of stopped the specific spiritual journey for a while. Then I started getting into readings, like psychic readings, and digging deep into meditation and channeling, messing around with friends and doing readings for each other, and getting to the point where it was really good and just freaking spot on. We would even have a weekly get together in my friend Dave's living room. We even called it the living room meeting. And we would just sit and read with each other and do readings, and people heard about it and started showing up. And there were times where we had 25 people in this guy's living room, and everybody paid $5 to cover refreshments, but all the readings were free, and we just did it. And it was amazing. And I looked forward to every single Tuesday night for a long time, for years. My meditations really took me places. I would just travel and talk to ascended masters. I got into Reiki and ended up going through the disciplines to become a Reiki master teacher. And along with that, I got married and had a couple kids and got divorced, and got married and had another kid and got divorced, and had reached a point I was working full time all the time in retail management and training, and I had reached a point where my older boys were adults, and my third son was 16 and had moved to South Carolina with his mom. I grew up in Massachusetts, by the way, and I just was burned out. I was fried. I was so sick of going to work every day and not really getting anything out of it. And I wanted to give spirituality a shot. I wanted to give a shot to trying to make a living at being a coach and being a Reiki master and reading for people. And so I literally sold everything that I had that didn't fit in my pickup truck. And I drove from Massachusetts to Kansas City and completely changed my life, completely changed it. That's a story for another time, that whole trip and what happened when I got out here can probably be saved for another episode. But long story short, I was working part-time in a little bookstore as a barista. My previous last job, the one I walked away from, was I was a manager trainer for Starbucks. So getting the barista job was a piece of cake, and it gave me something to do until I found a full-time job. And I was working one day, and in walked this beautiful blonde. I had not seen her before. I walked up to her to see if she needed some help, because we had a little bookstore that sold spiritual knickknacks and spiritual books, things like that. So I was talking to her, and she and I ended up talking for, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, just about life and what kind of journey she was on and what I believed. And when she walked out, I turned around, and the two people that were working with me were staring at me. And one of them goes, "Are you okay?" And I literally looked her in the eye and said, "I don't know what the fuck just happened to me, but I knew I wanted to know that woman better." Well, within half an hour, we had friended each other on Facebook, and we're chatting, and we shared numbers, and we're texting, and then we started going to different spiritual events together. And she made it very clear that she was just out of a marriage and had no desire to get into another relationship. She just wanted to be friends. And at that point, I had only been out here a few months. I didn't want to start up anything serious either. So, and then she made a point of saying it again, and then she made a point of saying it again. And I finally said, "Okay, look, I get it, but you got to stop saying it, because it reaches a point where it feels like rejection anyway." So we just stopped, and we spent time together, and we did a lot of not religious, but a lot of spiritual soul searching together. And she'd be happy to tell you her story, but she was in a rough place, and something in me just said, I need to try everything I can to help this woman. She's becoming special to me. And I started channeling again and started creating etheric tools to help her. That's where I created the Metatron Cube, and there will be an episode about the Metatron Cube and what it does and how it could help you at some point. That's something that I offer as a service for an exchange. And again, that's saved for another episode. Got to give you something to come back for. And we were spending so much time together. And finally, one day, the universe just said, "That's enough of this shit. You guys are supposed to be together." And we were. And we decided that we really wanted to be together. We wanted to start a family. She had no children. Mine were all grown. I had not planned on doing this when I drove out to Missouri. I thought I was done with all that, but I was in my 50s at that point. I was 53 when I got out here. It's like, well, if we're going to do this, we need to do it soon because I'm not getting any younger. And so, and she's significantly younger than me. She's 23 years younger than me. So she had just turned 30 when we met. And so we made the plan, and we ended up getting married and having this amazing little boy named Orion, and just working on our lives together. And it's been amazing, and it's been fucking messy. It's been really, really hard sometimes. We even separated for 9 months, lived in separate apartments in the same complex so that Orion still had us every single day. And we did our work. We didn't give up. We did our work. We created new tools when we couldn't find the right tools. And we found a way to get back to each other and to realize this is my person. This is who I'm supposed to be with. And no matter how hard it gets, no matter how difficult it might be, this is where we're supposed to be. And we have had some tough times since we got back together, but we never leave. We never give up. We just keep trying. So here I am at a podcast wanting to share some stories and some enlightenment and some tools with folks out there that have a similar story or a completely different story, but it kind of vibes with them. Because you're not alone. Life is tough sometimes, and you're not alone. And having a spiritual awakening on top of it makes it tougher, but you're not alone. So that's why we're here. And I want to do this together. Look, I've walked this path and I've stumbled and I've learned a lot along the way. So I'm here to share what I've learned and to hold space for you, for your journey. Because we're all in this together. So, what's the podcast going to be like? Well, each episode is going to have a topic, a kind of a focal point. Sometimes it'll be just me talking about things and sharing some ideas and some tools and maybe some channelings, things like that. But I'm also planning on having guests at some point. I've actually got several people that have already said, yes, I want to do this with you. And I've got a list of people that I still need to reach out to. But I plan on having guests at some point. Probably the first few episodes will be just me. And if you don't get sick of just listening to me, come back for the guests. I will have a Laura on at some point so that we can kind of talk through some stuff. But some of the episode topics that I've got planned out, talking about the dark side of high frequencies, talking about how healing is messy, but that's okay. We've got an episode on empath survival strategies, how tough it is to be surrounded by intense energy as an empath, and some tools to kind of help get through that. Another episode, the ego isn't the enemy. Everybody is always giving a lot of negative connotations. That's not the word. Anyways, to the ego. And see, I told you, it wasn't going to be perfect. And the ego isn't always a bad thing. So we just got to know how to work with it. And maybe one of my wife's favorite episode ideas, she laughed out loud for quite a while when she read it, is Mercury retrograde really to blame? We're going to get into that. So, thanks for listening. I'm really, really grateful that you're here and that you're starting this journey with me. So whether you've been on this path for years or you're just starting to explore, I want you to know that this is your space to feel seen and to feel supported. So thanks for hanging out with me. And remember, even when it's messy, you're getting closer to aligned AF every single day. Blessings.